Part 89. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 881. It seems like what I guessed. If you want the building ship to move forward according to the map on the secret sky, you must use the ghosts in the building. Because the yin energy and resentment of these evil ghosts are the driving force for this building ship to move forward. Su Tianqian dug it out with his hands and broke the seal on the cabin directly. A bone-chilling chill came out of the cabin door, making me shiver. There was nothing in the cabin, and not a single ghost could be seen. The environment was eerie and terrifying. The spider webs hanging on the top of the beams moved without wind, making it even more eerie. Just outside, I could clearly hear the dull footsteps coming from inside the cabin. But now when I open the hatch, there is nothing. This situation makes me frown. Su Tianxuan's beautiful eyes scanned the room lightly, and then walked into it. I followed closely, and while walking, Su Tianqian stopped. The aura on her body suddenly released, and she shouted sternly, "Give you 5 seconds, show up to me immediately. Otherwise, I will definitely make you lose your soul." Su Tianxuan's momentum was so shocking that Jin behind me shrank her head. Not only her, but I was also shocked by Su Tianxuan's amazing aura. As soon as he finished speaking, in just a second, a dark wind surged throughout the cabin, and countless ghost figures emerged from the darkness. Because the windows were sealed and no moonlight came in, I could only rely on the light coming from the cabin door to look at the ghosts in front of me. I was slightly startled when I saw the appearance of these ghosts clearly. It turned out to be one child after another. The number of yin children is extremely high, and they are so densely packed that they cannot be measured at all. I instantly knew the identity of these vaginal children. Those were the 3,000 boys and girls Su Fu took with him when he crossed east. 3,000 boys and girls, that's a total of 6,000 people. But now they all appear here. What happened when Su Fu crossed east? Will these children die here? Didn't it say that Su Fu crossed to Japan? Su Tianqian looked at these yin children coldly. The yin tongue was so frightened by Su Tianxuan's aura and cold eyes that he lowered his head and refused to raise it, like a child who had done something wrong. "I ask you, why are you here?" Su Tianqian asked, but no one answered her. "I'll ask you again why you are here. I know that my master wants to ask about the reasons for the death of these children." One of the slightly older children stepped forward and said, "We died on that island, but Mr. Su sealed us on this ship in order to prevent us from becoming sacrifices." I frowned. These 3,000 boys and girls died on Penglay Island. That is Penglay Immortal Island. Logically speaking, it should be a paradise, but why, all these children died there? Su Tianqian nodded slightly, then looked at me and said, "It seems that I guessed right. The spells outside the cabin are not used to suppress some kind of powerful ghosts, but to conceal their aura and protect these yin children." "Then master, you didn't tell me at first." Su Tianqian glanced at me indifferently and replied, "I didn't notice it at first, but after you left, I checked carefully and found that the seal of the cabin had been strengthened once." "Strengthened once? That first time should be arranged by Su Fu, and the time of strengthening should be by Grandpa. However, it's okay for Su Fu to protect these yin children. Why does Grandpa still need to protect them after thousands of years apart?" Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 882. What did these vaginal children go through during their lifetime? I looked at these yin children and asked, "You have been trapped here for thousands of years. What has happened in these thousands of years?" The yin boy who just spoke had a hesitant look on his face. He glanced at me, then lowered his head and said nothing. Yin Tong's reaction made me slightly stunned. I realized that Su Fu's journey to the east thousands of years ago was not as simple as imagined. I looked at the yin boy and said word by word, "I know you have been looking for Penglay Immortal Island. Tell me what happened 1,000 years ago, and I can take you there. The building boat has been sailing on the sea for thousands of years, obviously looking for the way to Penglay Island. The driving force that supports the sailing of the building ship is the yin energy and resentment of these yin children. To be more precise, it is the obsession of yin children. Resentment arises from the heart, and obsession is the manifestation of the heart. Since these yin children are unwilling to tell me what happened 1,000 years ago, then I will use the obsession in their hearts to get them to tell this matter. As soon as these words came out, surprise appeared on the faces of those yin boys, and they all looked at me with pleading eyes. Do you really know how to get to Penglay Island? We have arrived at Penglay Immortal Island before, but that was led by Mr. Su. That's right, we don't know how to get to Penglay Island. Please tell us how to get to Penglay Immortal Island. We need to find Mr. Su and rescue him. These yin children are talking to each other one by one, which makes people feel a little overwhelmed. I quickly stretched out my hand to signal these yin children to be quiet. Yin Tung quickly closed his mouth. I looked at them and said, since I said this, it proves that I have the means to go there, but you have to tell me what happened to you 1,000 years ago. The yin boy no longer had any hesitation on his face, and he said, the first emperor Yingzheng was tyrannical and immoral, and he recruited scholars from all over the world to seek the elixir of immortality. Qin Shi Huang's contribution as an emperor throughout the ages is indelible. He wiped out the 6 kingdoms, unified the country, and created an imperial system. Without Qin Shi Huang, the unification situation would not have been so easy. Of course, if there was no Qin Shi Huang, there would definitely be such people to fill the gaps in history in the future. Heroes are born. However, many people say that Qin Shi Huang was a tyrant, but this statement is unquestionable. In the history of 5,000 years, many emperors brutally killed the people of the country when they came to power. Some of them were even more brutal than Qin Shi Huang. As for why Qin Shi Huang was called a tyrant, I think it is directly related to the dynasty he lived in. The Qin dynasty was powerful but short-lived. The world has a deep impression of this dynasty, so they remember Qin Shi Huang's crimes and merits and demerits very clearly. Of course, Qin Shi Huang's most pedantic and cruel behavior was searching for the elixir of life. In order to seek immortality, Qin Shi Huang emptied the treasury and encouraged alchemists to refine elixirs. At that time, the number of alchemists should be the largest in Chinese history. Yin Tung looked at me and said, some alchemists were brutally killed if they could not refine the elixir of immortality, and the person who proposed to find Penglay Immortal Island was not Mr. Su. I frowned and asked, who is that? A bad premonition suddenly arose in my heart. Yin Tung slowly spit out 2 words, and these 2 words made me freeze on the spot. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 883. Zhao Mian. When Yin Tong said that it was not Su Fu who proposed the search for Penglay Fairy Island, I connected with Zhao Mian in my heart. But I never expected that it was really him. Zhao Mian's identity is very mysterious and special. He can be found throughout 5,000 years of history. No one knows when he appeared in this world. No one knows what his true identity is. Then what? I asked. Yin Tong continued, at first, Zhao Mian did not tell the first emperor about this matter, but first found my master Su. I nodded and signaled Yin Tong to continue. Yin Tong continued, Zhao Mian and my master Su said that immortality is an illusory thing. It is impossible to refine the elixir of immortality in this life. But if you can't do it, they, the alchemists, will only die. Is immortality an illusory thing? I don't know. Take Zhao Mian as an example. He has lived for 1,000 years. Has he achieved immortality in a certain sense? Look at the gods in the underworld. the great emperor of Fengdu, the ghost emperor of the four directions, the 10 palaces of Yama. Have these gods also become immortals? It's just a different way to stay in this world. Therefore, I think it is not very realistic to achieve immortality in the true sense. There is only another way to continue to exist in this world. Yin Tong continued, Zhao Mian suggested that my family, Mr. Su, should escape with him. My family thought that Zhao Mian was right, so he immediately agreed to Zhao Mian's proposal. If I were Su Fu, I think I would agree to Zhao Mian's proposal. But the premise of agreeing is that I don't know the true face of Zhao Mian. Zhao Mian is cunning, and he is very good at disguising himself. Zhao Mian and my family discussed that the two of us should go together to find the legendary Penglai Fairy Island, and then take 3,000 boys and girls to live on the island. Even if they can't find the fairy island, they can just find an island. Get rid of the first emperor's pursuit. And the two of them can also rely on our 3,000 boys and girls to reproduce new generations and build a new country. I have to admit that Zhao Mian's proposal is indeed very exciting. You must know that before Qin Shi Huang died, his obsession with immortality was almost demonic. Killing is just one of the simplest ways to vent your anger. What happened later was the same as what happened in history. Zhao Mian found the first emperor Ying Zheng and said that he was going to find the legendary Penglai Island, and asked for the company of 3,000 boys and girls. Yin Tong looked a little lonely when he said this. We are very lucky to be chosen by the adults, because this means that we can get rid of the tyrannical rule of the first emperor, but we never imagined that the legendary fairy island is actually a hell on earth. The people living on it, immortals, can no longer be called immortals, they can only be called demons. The more Yin Tong talked, the more excited he became. I asked, why do you say that Penglai Immortal Island is a hell on earth? Also, immortals are immortals. They have immortal status and should be able to inspire all living beings for mortals. Why do you call it a demon? I ask this question to verify a conjecture in my mind. Immortals are gods. I have been in contact with several gods. However, they made me feel very uncomfortable. To give a few examples, Zhang Yuqian, as the city god of Tianfu City, actually attacked ordinary people in order to improve his own strength. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 884. In order to expand his power, Shenxia used the immortal tree to imprison the souls of those who died in vain. They claim to be gods, but they do shameful things. This gives people the feeling that the rulers of the authorities love and respect their people on the surface, but what about the world? But they burned, killed, looted, and committed all kinds of evil. After hearing my question, Yin Tong looked at me deeply and asked, I wonder what you think of immortals. I was slightly stunned. I didn't expect this little kid to question me like a kid. However, I didn't get angry. In a sense, these Yin children have existed in the world thousands of times longer than me. I looked at the Yin boy in front of me and said slowly, whether it is an immortal or a god, or a human, a ghost, or a demon, every existence has its own meaning, and ghosts and demons are not the words for evil. Similarly, gods and immortals are not ambassadors of goodness. If I had put it before, I would have said without hesitation that the most good is the gods, and the most evil is the monsters. But after experiencing so many things, I have adapted this eternal view. Good and evil, yin and yang, are like day and night. The two alternate and achieve each other. Only after experiencing the long night can one know the value of light, but, can the day really forgive the ashes of the night? Does the night really need to be forgiven by the day? I never thought I would think about this one day, but it is something I have to think about. Yin Tong looked at me with a complicated expression, and after a while, he said, you are right, the immortals on the immortal island are just shadows under the day, and their hearts are full of filth. As soon as these words came out, hatred appeared on the faces of countless Yin children. I glanced at Su Tianxian, and saw that her expression was calm, and the expression on her face did not change much. It seemed that she didn't care about such things, or that she already knew the true appearance of the immortal. After all the hardships, we finally arrived at Penglay Immortal Island. After arriving on the island, we did see the immortal. And those immortals actually want to sacrifice us for their own selfish desires. Let us be his sacrifices. My Lord Su naturally couldn't agree, so he used a trick to get us back to the building ship, but on the way back, we were discovered. Yin Tong clenched his fists, looking very angry. When they saw us trying to escape, he killed us all in a rage. When I heard this, my pupils trembled violently. The ones who killed these Yin boys turned out to be the immortals on Penglay Immortal Island. Moreover, he still chose to kill them because of his own anger. In order to protect our souls, Mr. Su desperately sent us to the building ship and sealed us in the cabin to avoid the pursuit of those immortals. Moreover, I hope that one day we can successfully reincarnate. By this point, everything has become clear. Unexpectedly, the legendary Penglay Island turned out to be this kind of existence. However, what worries me is, can Penglay Island really completely eliminate the evil core? Something suddenly rang out to me and I asked, I wonder if you have seen any old people who look somewhat similar to me over the years. When Yin Tong heard my words, he began to look at me carefully. His eyes changed from doubtful at first to blank and finally became excited. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 885. Are you a descendant of Enren Lu? Enren Lu should be referring to my grandfather. I nodded and said, I am his grandson. After hearing this, Yin Tong seemed very excited and fell to his knees with a plop. Not only him, but the other vagina boys also knelt down towards me. This scene made me a little confused. I asked, what are you doing? Get up, get up. These Yin children did not stand up, but kowtowed to me 3 times before standing up. Yin Tong said to me, I didn't expect you to be a descendant of Enren Lu. I didn't take a closer look at your appearance at first, but after I took a closer look, I discovered that you look exactly the same as Enren Lu. I nodded and said, he is my grandfather. Yin Tong smiled and said, Enren Lu is not an old man. He was only in his 30s when he came here. I was slightly stunned. Grandpa was here in his 30s. Later, Yin Tong told me the purpose of my grandfather's visit. Grandpa's purpose of coming here is the same as mine, also to find Penglay Fairy Island. However, when Grandpa came here, the seals on the building ship almost collapsed. If my grandpa hadn't appeared in time, they would have been discovered, and what awaited them would have been in despair. No, it has been discovered that the immortals on Penglay Immortal Island have come to deal with these Yin children. It was my master who lured those guys away alone and then strengthened the seal. Hearing this, I nodded and suddenly realized something and asked, now that the seal has been broken, won't the immortals on Penglay Island discover you? Yin Tong nodded and said, whether they find us or not, we must rescue Mr. Su. Determined expressions appeared on the faces of these Yin children. I glanced at Su Tianxian, and she shook her head at me. I understood what she meant. I said to these Yin children, you can't do this. Yin Tong was slightly startled and asked, why can't you do this? I thought for a while and said, you all said that there are immortals living on the fairy island, and you are just ghosts. Although you have lived for thousands of years, your own moral conduct is as weak as the newly born ghosts. Although the number of these Yin children is large, their moral conduct is extremely weak. Logically speaking, if these Yin children have such deep grievances, their moral conduct will be extremely high, but they are so weak. This should be related to the seal on the entire ship. It seems that this Su Fu has really good intentions. He is afraid that these underworld children will not be accepted by the underworld if they make mistakes because they are too high-minded. Yin Tong shook his head at me and replied, we have a way. Even if his soul is gone and he will never be reincarnated, we will still rescue Mr. Su. Looking at these obsessive cuckolds, I shook my head helplessly. Don't know how to answer them. At this time, Su Tianqian stepped forward and said, we can promise you to help you rescue Su Fu, but you have to promise me not to go to the island. The Yin boys fell into silence. After a while, they raised their heads and said, okay, we promise you. Rescue Su Fu? And now is Su Fu a human or a ghost, or another existence? Su Tianqian looked at me and said, when we go to the island, we are not going to be enemies with those immortals. What we want to do is to completely eliminate the evil core. As for those immortals, they will not attack us, and there is no need for us to cause trouble. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanba. Chapter 886. Su Tianqian is right. The purpose of our coming to Penglai Immortal Island is to destroy the evil core. There is no need to conflict with the immortals on the fairy island. Su Tianqian thought for a while and said, as for Su Fu, it is best for us to rescue him secretly. I think my master means what he says, and since he has promised these Yin children, he will definitely do it. I nodded and said, this is the only way right now. Su Tianqian casually handed the heavenly secret in his hand to Yinteng and said, the path to Penglai Immortal Island is on it, and the next step is up to you. The Yin boy took the Tianmi-Ru with some excitement and nodded heavily at Su Tianqian. Afterwards, our master and apprentice left the cabin. After a while, the huge building ship began to turn around and slowly move towards the east. The expression on Su Tianxian's face was very serious, and she didn't know what she was thinking. Jin stood on the deck, staring blankly at the churning sea water. I came to her side and asked, I think you seem to be afraid of humans. Did you have any misunderstandings about humans before? Jin's misunderstanding of human beings must exist. I ask this just because I want to know what Jin's heart is. Find out more and see if you can help her resolve her knot. Jin turned around, glanced at me with her beautiful eyes, and then lowered her eyes again. She said, when I was young, my mother and I were captured by humans. Jin slowly told me what happened when she was a child. After listening to this, I realized how miserable Jin was when she was young. Because their tears can turn into pearls. No matter what dynasty they are in, they are the targets of human hunting. Because as long as you get a shark, you can have endless wealth. The greed of human nature is vividly displayed at this moment, and they will use various methods to make the sharks cry. Beaten, imprisoned, even beaten and stripped of his skin and tendons. Because sharks are monsters and will not die easily. Jins and her mother were kidnapped by a human, who was a fisherman. He said that Jins and her daughter were imprisoned, beaten day and night, and used pearls in exchange for a fortune. A small fisherman became a downpayer in the city in a short period of time. Human greed is terrible. After the fisherman got money, he wanted to get more money. When Jins narrated this, her delicate body couldn't help but tremble. Once, that man drained the blood out of my mother's body in front of me. He seemed to think that this was not enough, and actually, cut off my mother's fish tail. Although we sharks have strong recovery capabilities, the pain is indeed real. In order to ask for it, the fisherman was simply crazy. This torture lasted for 6 full years. One day, a Taoist priest came to the fisherman's house. This Taoist priest was invited by the fisherman to look at feng shui. One night, the Taoist priest came to the cell where Jin's mother and daughter were imprisoned. Without saying a word, the Taoist priest opened the cell door and let Jins and her daughter out. That Taoist priest seemed to know my mother. My mother started sobbing the first time she saw the Taoist priest. Later, the Taoist priest released Jins and her daughter. but he never thought that the matter would be exposed and lead to other people chasing him. The Taoist priest was killed to protect Jins and his daughter. Afterwards, Jins and her daughter hid in a cave. Because the fisherman couldn't find the specific location of Jins's mother and daughter, he made a very crazy move. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 887. The fisherman found 7 or 8 Taoist priests, and then these Taoist priests joined forces to set up a large formation on the mountain range where Jins and her daughter were hiding. As long as there is the slightest feng shui movement in the mountains, these warriors will know it. Jins's eyes were full of pain, as if the next memory was her most painful existence. Because the entire mountain range is imprisoned by the magic circle, my mother and I dare not go out, because if we go out, we will be discovered, and what awaits us is endless torture. Because the magic circle sealed the mountain, Jins and her mother did not dare to leave the cave at all. They hid in the cave for half a month. The Taoist priests outside still had no intention of retreating, and seemed to want to force Jins and her daughter to death in the mountain. Monsters also need to eat, and they, the sharks, cannot leave the water for too long. At that time, Jins was so hungry that her head was dizzy and her eyes were dizzy. If this continued, there would be only death waiting for them. I originally thought I would die there, but I didn't expect that my mother would find food one night. I was so hungry that I lost consciousness and had no idea what my mother was giving me. Jins didn't know what her mother gave her to eat. She didn't know what that thing tasted like, she only knew that her stomach was full. There is no precise definition of whether the shark is a demon or a fairy. But both demons and immortals need to eat. Before the monsters take shape, they kill prey to fill their stomachs. The same is true for immortals. Before they become immortals, they still need to eat whole grains. Not to mention the young Jins. 10 days later, I regained some consciousness, and when I looked at my mother, I finally knew what I had been eating these days. Jins's delicate body began to tremble violently, and her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. The tears fell from the corners of her eyes and turned into crystal clear pearls. I already had a rough guess in my mind, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I looked at Jins. Jins could no longer hold back the grief in her heart and squatted on the ground, crying out in pain. I looked at Jins who was crying so sadly, and my heart ached. I just looked at her quietly, without any intention of comforting her. Jins vented for a while, stood up, and then said to me, "I survived, but my mother left." Before she left, she used her last breath of strength to say to me. I interrupted and said, "What did you eat?" Jins immediately froze on the spot, lowered his eyes, bit his red lips, and said with a choked voice, I don't want to say." My expression turned a little cold. I looked at Jins and said coldly, "Tell me. What did you eat to survive?" Jins still lowered his eyes, kept shaking his head, and choked at me, I don't want to say it." "Say, you must say it today." I still said reluctantly. Jins raised her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why do you have to let me say it?" "I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it. I know that my current behavior is tantamount to adding salt to Jins's wounds. But I have reasons to do it. Because if Jins never dares to face the whole thing, she won't be able to open her heart, and she won't be able to truly get out of the shadow of the past." Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 888. Jins bit her red lips and looked at me stubbornly. I just looked at Jins quietly without saying anything. I don't want to say." I shook my head at Jins and said very seriously, "Speak out, you need to face it, otherwise you will not get over this matter, and this matter will always linger like a nightmare in your heart." Jins lowered his head, not knowing what he was thinking. I could only hear the crisp sound of pearls falling on the deck. That's... Jins stammered, her delicate body trembling, and hesitated for a long time before continuing, "That's my mother's meat." This sentence was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Jin's suppressed emotions surged out like a river bursting from a dam. In order to keep me alive, my mother even tore her own flesh off alive and fed it to me. Jins went from sobbing softly at the beginning to bursting into tears now, venting her inner emotions wantonly. This kind of thing is an inner demon that is difficult to solve for anyone. Su Tianxian looked at Jins, his eyes filled with sympathy. After a while, Jins stood up, came to me, and said, "Thank you." Jins has a gentle personality and is also very knowledgeable and courteous. I shook my head and asked, "What did your mother say to you last?" Jins replied, "She told me to live well and not resent humans, because there will always be someone who will treat me wholeheartedly regardless of your identity, and that person is the most dazzling bundle in your life light." I finally know why Jins is so kind. Not everyone stays kind-hearted after going through something like that. And most people who experience these things will choose to resent society. Because Jins has a good mother, she can still maintain her kind nature. I don't know why that Taoist priest tried his best to save Jins and her mother. But I know that the Taoist priest is the most dazzling light in Jins's mother's life. So, you must listen to your mother's words on the phone and live well. The crystal tears in Jins's eyes were as bright as gems. She nodded fiercely and said, "I will." Looking at the light in Jins's eyes, I knew that Jins walked out of the darkness. Sometimes it's just like this. If you don't hide something in your heart, you'll feel better if you tell it. Su Tianxian came to me, smiled and said, "Xiao Su, I didn't expect that you are quite capable of enlightening others." I smiled slightly and said, "No way." Su Tianxian looked at me, sighed, and said, "I hope that when you experience some huge blows in the future, you can quickly get over it." Huge hit? I've already been through it once, a death in the family. May I ask, have I arrived now? I don't think so. I just inherited their wishes and lived well. Of course, my soul also has sustenance, and that is Su Tianxian and the group of partners around me. My family is my motivation to move forward. If I have to say there will be another huge blow in the future, it will be Su Tianxian and my friends. At this moment, a thick, dark fog suddenly appeared directly ahead. I was slightly stunned. This dark fog was like a dark abyss, carrying unknown terror. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanbao. Chapter 889. Su Tianxuan's face became a little solemn after seeing the black fog. She turned around and said to us, "You go back to the cabin first." Listening to Su Tianxuan's tone of voice and looking at the expression on her face, I knew that this black mist must be very complicated. I didn't dare to neglect and entered the cabin with Jins. Yu Sun Tao didn't come in with us. She stood in front of Su Tianxian and didn't know what she was saying to Su Tianxian. Su Tianxian nodded slightly, and the two of them kneaded the formula together, and then set up the magic circle. The magic circle slowly enveloped the cabin. After doing all this, Su Tianxian and Yu Sun Tao also walked in. I quickly asked, "Master, what's going on with the arrival of the black mist outside?" Su Tianxian closed the cabin door, looked at it and said, "Have you and Cai Dai fallen asleep?" I nodded and replied, "Yes." Su Tianxian explained, "The area shrouded in black fog is a place similar to the abyss of dreams, a chaotic place in the real world. Most of these places appear in front of the powerful underworld and play a role in protecting the underworld." I was slightly stunned and asked, "Protect the underworld? But we are going to Penglai Immortal Island, how could it be the underworld?" Su Tianxian shook his head and replied, "I don't know, because I have never been to Penglai Island. I don't know what the situation is like there. Su Tianxuan's words faltered and he continued, I guess the Penglai Immortal Island was formed in the same way as the Yin realm, but the Yin realm you went to before was not too strong to form this black and mysterious realm. It suddenly dawned on me that this black realm must be very difficult, otherwise my master would not be so serious. Su Tianxian looked at the position of the cabin with a serious expression. She continued to say to me, this black mist is very dangerous. Once you get lost in the black mist, if there is no one to guide you, there is no chance of survival. Moreover, no one knows what exists in the lost realm. The nature of this black misty realm is exactly the same as the dream abyss. The same is true in the dream abyss. Once you go deep, it is extremely difficult to escape. Moreover, there are all kinds of nightmares in the abyss of dreams. Last time Cai Dai and I encountered a dream taper. I just hope this magic circle can withstand the black mist. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a dull knock on the door of the cabin. The dull sound of knocking on the door was particularly clear in the silent environment. I got a look on my face, and the monster in the realm was coming. The sound of the beat changed from dull and slow at the beginning, to rapid, and finally to crazy. It's like that ghost outside the cabin is about to break in. Suddenly, the cabin door glowed with golden light. It seemed that the magic circle Su Tianxian had arranged before had an effect. But as time goes by, the light of the magic circle becomes weaker and weaker. A bone-chilling chill penetrated through the cracks in the cabin. Moment. The surrounding temperature dropped suddenly, making people shiver. Moreover, the banging on the door outside the cabin became more and more urgent and crazy, and every sound tugged at my heartstrings. Su Tianxian stepped forward, holding the spell in his hand, and golden light flashed on his fingertips. She picked up the sword technique, pointed it at the cabin, and then muttered something. The golden light that had dimmed became dazzling again. The rapid knocking on the door outside gradually subsided. Finished. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanba. Chapter 890. As soon as this idea appeared, a loud click was heard, and a pale ghost hand broke into the door. Then came the second and third one. Countless pale ghost hands broke through the hatch, and the intact hatch instantly became riddled with holes. I was extremely shocked. The magic circle set up by his master was extremely powerful, but it was easily defeated by these guys. One of the holes in the magic circle was broken, and we had to find a way to make it up. I quickly activated the pure lotus mark on the palm of my left hand. Hazy white light like moonlight burst out from my palm. Without any hesitation, I slapped my palm towards the cabin door. The next moment, the white light instantly dispersed those pale ghost hands. I squeezed the secret with my right hand, and white light shrouded the hatch, and then slowly submerged into the broken wooden board. Immediately afterwards, a lotus mark was printed on the hatch, emitting a faint light. I breathed a long sigh of relief. Luckily I caught up. With the blessing of the pure lotus seal, the array became much stronger. There was silence in the cabin, and everyone looked at each other. I raised a wry smile at the corner of my mouth and said, I didn't expect that this black realm could be so dangerous. Su Tianxian nodded slightly but said nothing, and his frowning eyebrows did not relax at all. The ancient building on the entire building ship itself has a huge seal, otherwise it would not be possible to sail in this black and confusing realm. But just when we entered here, the seal was broken by Su Tianxian. None of us spoke, quietly waiting for the building boat to sail through the black mist. About half an hour later, the yin boy just came to me and said, "We have gone out." I nodded and looked at Su Tianxian. She came to the cabin, removed the Jinglian mark with a wave of her hand, and then walked out. We followed closely behind, and the black misty realm was already left behind by the building ship. The pale moonlight poured down, and I felt a sense of joy in surviving the disaster. The atmosphere just now was extremely depressing. If there was any abnormality, I'm afraid we would all be lost in the Black Realm. The building boat moved forward slowly, and Jins came to my side and said, "We are about to reach Penglay Island." I looked at Jins and asked, "I have a question. The Black Zone is so dangerous. How did you get in?" Jins was stunned for a moment, and her expression became a little lonely. She murmured in a low voice, "The first emperor needs a large number of ever-burning lamps to prepare the imperial mausoleum. My people are being mercilessly hunted by those alchemists. In order to save our lives, we can only hide near Penglay Island. Although the black mist is dangerous, the fat of our mermaids can be burned to dispel the mist. Just like this, in order to protect the last seeds of our shark clan, the elders of the clan did not hesitate to burn themselves to protect us." I looked at Jins with a complicated expression. I never thought that Jins's life experience could be so tragic. His tribe was massacred, and his mother died in front of him. How many people could feel this kind of grief? The building boat sailed for about 5 minutes, and the black outline of a huge island came into my eyes. Because it was so far away, I could only see how huge the island was. Looking around, it looks like a big mountain standing above the sea level. When the building boat approached, I was able to see clearly the Penglay Island bathed in the moonlight. The vegetation on the island is lush and lush. Not only that, there is also a hazy mist lingering on the fairy island.